Thank you so much. Most particularly, thank you to the audience for coming tonight. Thank you for the organizing, and thank you very much for everybody who's been here on behalf of democracy. I would say it's so critical and important. October the 19th is just around the corner, and I'm pleased to be able to be here tonight in pursuit of being the MLA for the new riding. I just want to characterize some of my thoughts about running for that particular riding. I was really excited, actually, at the thought, this is going to be, to me, the epicenter of what is happening in our local community. Langley City and the Township of Langley are going to undergo unprecedented change as a result of the SkyTrain. And so I think some people are really excited about that. Some people are full of trepidation. Some are not quite sure what to think about that for a variety of reasons. But for me, the reason I wanted to put my name forward is because I think in the duration of the time that it's taking to do the planning and put this all together, it's really important that we look in particular on the social side of what we have in our community to make sure, for example, I do a lot of work around seniors and aging issues, and I want to make sure that people that could potentially be dispossessed and relocated as a result of development are not going to face those kind of challenges. I know the city has put together a new policy to double on the amount of money that people are going to be getting, but it's still not going to be enough for people who are going to have to be dispossessed. And so thank you very much again for coming, and I look forward to the exciting questions I know Corey's going to ask me. Thank you.
There we go. Well, let's dive in then. So, you mentioned SkyTrain's coming. That's an example of a big-ticket infrastructure investment in the community. But communities like Langley, where we're growing so fast, Surrey has the same problem. We've not seen the community supporting infrastructure keep up with growth. We do seem to be struggling to kind of always play catch-up. Langley's expected to add 100,000 people over the next 20 years. How will you, as MLA, be a voice to ensure Langley doesn't get left behind and gets the community supporting infrastructure investments it needs and deserves?
Okay, well, in 2 minutes, I just want to refer to my background. I was a councillor in the Township of Langley for 8 years, and during that time, I became really aware of the fact of how much we're going to struggle as a local government without aid and support from the province. If we are required to have so much density, people moving here, we're happy to have this, to be reinvigorated, to redevelopment, have all of these opportunities, but at the same time, it really requires a lot of money, and that money cannot be achieved just by property taxes. It's unfair, and their burden should be shared. I remember going to a UBCM meeting where I said directly to administrators, an MLA's assistant, I said, you need to set aside monies so that we can have a formula that directs money that is going from our population increase into infrastructure. We need the certainty, and I really don't support the idea of changing zoning and density without knowing where that money is coming from. I think it's not a good business plan.
I appreciate that comment. And building on the SkyTrain, you mentioned some people are trepidation or concerned or have some trepidation around the SkyTrain, and often that's related in our experience from our members is around the challenges of crime and homelessness. The riding you're running in includes Langley City, which unfortunately has more than its fair share of these challenges. Residents and businesses can see this issue on display vividly on our streets and in our parks, and it's increasingly on the minds of voters if we listen to the polls. What would you do as MLA to tackle this, and why do you think the efforts and dollars that have been put into this so far haven't yielded the results that people are expecting?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really perplexing problem that we have. I will just say, in hearkening back to my time on council, it was something that was always considered. I know the city of Langley struggles with the same. They have more visible crime, I would say, and the statistics will bear that out. But the township of Langley, certainly all of that, if you read the local headlines in the media, we certainly know that there are issues and more concern. That's one of the issues that was registered most with people being asked what's your top of mind issue for the election, and it is public safety. Public safety is something that is very complicated just because we have a confluence of things that needed to be dealt with. So we have mental health issues, we have homelessness, we have individuals who are subject to recidivism. Many times to hear the police chief come and say, listen, we have these people and, you know, they're just causing a multitude of problems, but we can't get rid of them except to try and expel them from town. You know, these are things that we need to have more resources. This is somewhere where I think that the provincial government needs to do a better job, and has done in the past since 2017, to come up with a strategy. And it was a nonpartisan, so it was a group of individuals from all parties, and they made recommendations about public safety, but it was never adopted. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board to review this, to work with the community to find out what the issues are, including policing, more community policing, more mental health, more interventions, and just more wraparound services to address the problem.
Okay, thanks for your response on that. In your opening comments there, I think I picked up you mentioning talking about kind of rental displacement, and as the growth comes in there. With increasing demand for rental housing in the region, what measures would you support to support both renters and the small-scale landlords that are required to have the units? How do we balance this idea of affordability with the viability of the market?
Yes, that's another really good question. I know that the government has been spending through policies quite a lot of effort and our taxpayer dollars on developing different levels of affordability for people that want to get into the market. So there's rental market, there's homes for the middle income individuals. I just really want to focus, because I haven't heard a lot about it in this campaign, about people that are elderly. I just want to point out that there is a certain sentiment that a lot of people seem to have, that the elderly are very well off, that there are a lot of people that just have the equity in their home and they're able to sell it, and then they can get the home care or other supports that they need. There is a huge and growing percentage of individuals, of non-funded senior individuals, who are becoming homeless. Now, I've spent a lot of time, I work with the United Way, I'm on a board, and so provincially we discuss these things. What do we need to do to fine-tune this? And the bottom line is we really need to have more units that are built of rent geared to income. So it is a formula. It's a formula we know that works. It's a formula that we used to have, because when the federal government was more involved in housing in the 1980s, before they decided that was no longer their interest or jurisdiction by choice, then we had this problem of all of these different complexes and people living in places that basically the building aged out. They didn't have money to continue, and they never invested in those. So I'm really a keen supporter of doing that. It's not to the neglect or not looking at other interests, because I do think people have young families, people who have other individuals that they need to look after, including themselves. We need housing for workers. We need all of those things. But I think in terms of being equitable, we really have to look at people who have invested in our community for decades, that live here now and are definitely in danger of being dislocated as a result of not having these policies.
Thanks for that. I'm going to pick up on you mentioned seniors, so let's pivot to that topic. And Langley is, as I mentioned a few times, the fastest growing community in Metro Vancouver, and 37% of the population is 65 or over. And so our Langley seniors population is higher than the regional average. Fraser Health has an overall shortage of 8,000 beds, and many are needed in Langley. I think most people, if they aren't seniors themselves, obviously have a senior who they love in their lives and care about this issue. So what are your thoughts on how, you talked about seniors housing, what are your thoughts on how to ensure Langley's growing seniors population has a place to call home when they are no longer able to live independently?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm happy to say that one of the individuals that was so instrumental in making sure that I have a place to live is in the audience tonight. So I'm just referring to the Aspire building. It came before council. It seemed like a great plan for a 55-plus building. It's near the hospital. It's near services in a walkable community. I think this is a great model for what we need to do. But we need service providers, churches, we need the local government, anybody that has land. There are so many opportunities for these entities to line themselves up with government funding, either federal funding, provincial funding, or both. And so I look at that and say, this is a wonderful opportunity to house the approximately 30% of seniors that are going to be living in our community. And I'm just really, really very distressed when I deal with people that I know that have to talk to seniors every day that come crying to the Langley Senior Resource Centre and absolute just panic because they know that their building is not going to be able to accommodate them anymore. Why? Because it's being redeveloped, it's being consolidated, and these are understandable things. This is what's happening, but we have to be more proactive to make sure that that doesn't happen to individuals. And I certainly know, a lot of people, your mental health, your ability to stay in a community, aging in place, these are all things that need to be addressed by your housing strategy. It has to be holistic. You can't take people and stick them out somewhere outside of the community where they don't have any services, particularly seniors who can't drive. And let's be honest, there is a transportation issue in the township of Langley for seniors, especially individuals that are no longer able to drive.
Thank you, Petrina. You mentioned, and I wanted to ask you this, you've mentioned your experience on township council and working with at the municipal level. What do you think that will bring in your role as MLA, that experience? How will that come to bear on what you're able to do as an MLA?
Yeah. Well, there's nothing like on-the-job experience, I would say, to dictate to yourself, gee, if I was in that position, this is what I could do. So first of all, what I would say is my biggest objective, if I was to become an MLA, is to right away consider how can we collaborate with our senior level of government. If anybody knows about the community charter, we are historically known as local government as a child of the province. And so there are many different challenges that we have to raise funds, to be able to be more autonomous, and to figure out how this growing gap can be achieved of the disparity between the money that we have to work with for property taxes and what we need to build out and to provide services. These are legitimate services that need to be addressed. But I'm a collaborative person. I would say more than anything, how you get things done on government is to be part of a team that looks at the problem and comes at it from different points of view. To me, that's the most democratic and positive thing to do. Any homogenous group who thinks that groupthink is a good idea is really missing the mark. You need to have a bunch of different opinions, people that are willing to be open to collaborate, to listen, and I think that my experience on council really would suggest that I'm quite good at that.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Today, the community of Grand Forks remains on evacuation alert due to a nearby forest fire. And while we had a bit of a moderate summer here, it was named the hottest ever recorded for the Northern Hemisphere this last summer. But with affordability, housing, other concerns front of mind, the environment and climate doesn't seem to have been kind of reached the fore of this election yet. What are your thoughts on how much of a priority this ought to be for the next government? And what would you do as an MLA to champion climate and environment?
Thank you for this most important question. I would have to say to characterize the different entities that are running. So there's people that are independent, there's the formal parties, and the Green Party, I believe, is the most consistent in their objective of putting the environment first. So having been the person on Langley Township Council that brought the climate emergency declaration to the township, I could say that it is something that is one of my prouder moments in my political history. And I think that the province and this election period has really shone a light on the differences between the parties when it comes to what initiatives, what objectives, and how they will prioritize the climate. I have used this argument many times, and oftentimes an economic argument is equally compelling as to a values argument. Every dollar that is spent on climate mitigation will save 3 to 5 in terms of flooding, fires, and any other kind of thing that can be caused by climate change. So I certainly think in terms of a valuable investment, this is something that we need to look at, continue to prioritize, and not fall back on these ideas that it's somebody else's problem, they need to do it first. We all have to play a role.
Thanks for your input on that. I want to kind of move into our jobs in the economy and cost of living categories here. And I told the There we go. I could have opened it for you. Sorry about that.
It was my fault for squeezing it at the same time.
I mentioned the anecdote earlier about the person whose nephew is leaving, and on a business side, we're seeing that too. We've had 3 of our members of the chamber who have left the chamber. 2 are moving their businesses to Calgary. One's moved their business to Vancouver Island. What are you going to do as an MLA to make BC and Langley a place where people can afford to stay and build a life, build a business, and build a family here?
Yes, thank you for that. Well, actually, I've been digging a bit into that. I know that the Chamber has done a lot of work, the BC Chamber and our local Chamber, to talk and take the stakeholders, the people in our community, the construction industry, the workers, the service industry, people that work in hospitals and take care of us, all of those individuals, they are critical to our ability to have a community so that we can live here. And the common denominator for all of those individuals, even for relatively high income earners, is the fact that it is very expensive to live here. And to get into the why would take too long. But how to address that problem? It means that we all have to look at each and every single policy that we have and review it for the purpose of considering, are these costs too high? What about all of these additions that we're making? Some of them need to be maybe scaled back somewhat. You know, to me, this is what needs to happen. If you have a policy that you've developed and you're working to try and figure out, is this the best for our community? You have to have a mechanism to know at a certain point, within a year or so, how is it working? Is it effective? Is it causing people to leave our province? Nobody wants people to leave our province. However many people are coming here, I know there are people leaving. And so the other thing we need to do is to make sure that we have more jobs for people. We have to have good jobs. I look at this community and say, we need to have more green jobs, for example. We need to have new industries come here. We need the hydrogen industry to come here. We need industries that are considered to be ones that will really help to move us forward in our climate objectives as well.
Thanks for that, and let's kind of pick up what you're talking about jobs. Let's pick up on the economy. I guess now former Finance Minister Petrina Arnason recently announced the deficit for this year is forecast to be $8.9 billion, the largest ever. Do the Greens have concerns with the level of deficit spending, and do you believe there needs to be a plan to balance the budget?
My time is running. I'm taking a deep breath. I really think this needs to be more top of mind. I know certainly I have read so many articles from the business community talking about the debt that we have, and I understand the balance that we have. We need to grow, we need to build. There's been a long delay in making sure that the infrastructure that we need has actually been developed, and that's a problem because it is very expensive now. And so this is not to say we need to curtail that, but I really think this is a perfect inflection point to look at our debt and to find out, what is our strategy? Are we just going to have endless debt? I can relate this to the Township of Langley and other local governments. We cannot have an endless debt. There are limits to this. And so I believe that the Green Party would feel the more that we have debt, the more we imperil ourselves, because the very thing that's helping us to grow is also undermining our ability to pay for social services. Because that interest rate is not going down, it's not zero anymore. It's a very expensive thing, and it continues to accrue if there's no management of that. So I'd say definitely the Greens. I'm a politically and economically conservative person, which might seem kind of an oxymoron to be a Green, but I do think that we need to have that conversation.
Thanks for that. You mentioned in your previous comment the idea of we need to bring hydrogen jobs here and green jobs. A lot of that takes training. Something that we continue to hear about at the Chamber is the challenge newcomers have in getting their international training and credentials recognized and being able to contribute to the economy and take those jobs. What do you think needs to be done to help people in fields like the trades, engineering, healthcare, get into the jobs they're trained to do?
Thank you very much for that. Well, most recently, the local Langley Immigration Partnership and the Chamber of Commerce put together a very valuable workshop that I attended, and I happened to go to the evening where they had highly skilled individuals that came from around the world. I think most of them were engineers, and I was there sort of like wallpaper to hear their stories and what was going on. And what I heard, and they were paired up with different business owners in the community that need to have skilled workers. And what's missing in this component is we need to have a lot more ability to fine-tune and change the accreditation. There's been a lot of discussion about that. People who come to our country, and even when I was younger in law school, I stood in line for financial aid with people who were trained lawyers from other countries and judges who drove, pizza vehicles. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but we need so many individuals. Well, there is something wrong with that when you get that kind of education, and that's what we're missing. And I can't help but notice we're sitting in KPU. It has a huge capacity to be an area, I think, where we can grow and develop the kind of training and skill set that we need to have for people that are coming to our community. I think that, immigration, we're setting different standards for people. We want people to come here who have a skill set, but we are missing the mark when we're not looking at how it is that we can employ them and get them to be part of our community and help us with the deficiencies that we have with the employment areas. Just, skilled doctors, skilled lawyers, skilled engineers. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, and we're coming up on our conversation time here. So again, I'm going to loop it back to what is the top issue here, which is cost of living and affordability, and some of these issues, energy costs, those are influenced by global events. Interest rates are set independently by the Bank of Canada. We don't have price controls on the groceries. So really, what can you do as an MLA? What can the Green Party do in the legislature to help make life affordable for the people who are here today?
To be honest, I think that there have been a lot of initiatives to help people. I think my biggest complaint about government, although I don't think it's not surmountable, is that there's always a time delay in between when something happens and the policies that come to rectify them. If government could be more proactive, I would definitely say, to work more with industry, for example, to find out ways to help them to streamline the process. We cannot build if they can't afford to have the building that they need to have done. They need to have skilled workers. They need to have a set of objectives they can understand. It has to be stable. It has to be something that makes sense from their business point of view. Certainly had lots of conversations with developers to know what their needs are. And so I think absent that, we really can't expect that our community can grow in a way that we need it to grow. If we're going to build ourselves out, and as you alluded to, Willowbrook itself, with the new SkyTrain station and having the 200th Street corridor, you're going to have another 100,000 people there. We have to be extremely proactive to make sure, as Megan mentioned, I think, to have really a diversity of options for people. We need to have places where people can live. We can't have firefighters and people living outside of our community where we're most vulnerable have situations come up and they have to drive over the bridge. So we really need to work to manage that. And it takes an awful lot of effort, and I think it takes a lot of collaboration to come up with those strategies, because politically speaking, I think we need to bring everybody together for that kind of conversation to be effective.
Thank you very much, Petrina. We have time now for some closing remarks. If you'd like to share any final comments with the audience and the viewers as well.
I can't believe how fast the time went. Seems like the last 4 years just whizzed right by. I just want to, again, thank everybody for coming and for your attention tonight. And I want to thank Corey for his really great questions. I think that this was a really wonderful way to make sure that people had an exposure to at least some of the candidates that are presenting themselves for this event tonight. I really sincerely hope that you will consider a green vote. I just want to say that for me, this is not a binary election. I see all the time in the media that it's the Conservatives and the NDP, as if it's a wasteland with nothing else in between. I think that we need to look at individuals who have principles character, education, and experience to bring this home, to represent the community that a person like myself for more than 20 years, I've looked after my parents here, I've lived here, and I've helped to govern. So I think that those are really important things to consider when looking at the ballot on October the 19th, or if you mail it in before that, just to consider. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Petrina.